Well, good morning. I'm Michael McSweeney, President and CEO of the Cement Association of Canada. And with me today, I have Carl Pearson, who's a first captain with the Thorold Fire and Emergency Services, and is also the past president of the Firefighters Association of Ontario. This is really a joyous time of year, but it's also a time of year when fires dramatically rise, caused by space heaters, candles, or electrical shorts caused by Christmas lights. These fires often cause a loss of life and certainly a loss of property. At this time of year, we want to urge Canadians to pay particular attention to fire safety. But more importantly, we want to draw your attention to a serious development that, if left unaddressed, could result in further loss of life and personal property. En cette période des fêtes, nous voulons attirer tout particulièrement l'attention des Canadiens sur la sécurité incendie. Plus important encore, nous voulons attirer votre attention sur un sérieux problème qui, si on ne le résout pas, pourrait causer encore peu plus de pertes de vie et de pertes matérielles. In recent months, those who promote wood buildings have been very successful in advocating for building code changes to allow for taller wood buildings. But their desire to have taller buildings should not compromise the safety of Canadians. We're here today to announce the start of a national advocacy effort to convince government leaders to develop building codes which just don't set a minimum standard, but strive to achieve a gold standard. Building codes need to reflect the very best in what we can do as a nation and protect the most vulnerable Canadians. Make no mistake, the efforts of those who promote taller wood buildings could make our most vulnerable citizens less safe. Seniors, the disabled, new Canadians, the less well-off, and even latchkey kids are among those who may be found in high-density, more cheaply constructed wood buildings. These citizens may be put at risk, and if this push for mid-rise building goes ahead without any changes, they will be put at risk. Safety should matter most, but those who are promoting changes to allow six-story wood buildings in the building code could make us all less safe, not more so. And that's something that should concern every Canadian. We're asking our government leaders to stop for a moment and reflect on the proposed changes that would allow six-story wood buildings. Just because we can build taller wood buildings doesn't mean we should. Do Canadians really want building codes that could compromise our safety? Do the building codes today actually reflect the expectations of Canadians? I personally don't think so. We believe that non-combustible stairwells and elevator shafts need to be included in the new building code. Today, there are no safe areas of refuge when an all-wood building fire takes place. None. And firefighters tell us that they have at least a better chance of saving lives if they have an area of safe refuge. In order to better protect those who live in wood frame buildings, it's essential that the exterior cladding and the roof be constructed with non-combustible materials. Currently, the proposed code changes would allow combustible exterior materials on these buildings. That will only allow fires to spread vertically, quickly, and thereby place the lives and adjacent buildings at risk. Also, for the protection of construction workers and the neighbors living adjacent to construction sites, we feel that the building code must ensure that automatic sprinkler systems are in place as the construction progresses. There should also be a minimum level of non-combustible fire separation required to prevent the fire spreading between adjoining units in the wood frame buildings of this size. And finally, and most importantly, the safety of firefighters needs to be addressed in the building code. Right now, they are not. This is a critical omission, and an omission that could cost the lives of firefighters and Canadians who depend on them. As the holiday season begins in earnest, we call on all levels of government to reflect on the proposed changes to the building code and to reflect on the safety and social costs of the proposed changes. Canadians expect nothing less. Thank you. Carl?
Thank you, Michael. Good morning. I'm here today because as a volunteer firefighter, I've seen firsthand the loss of life and property caused by fires, and I share the concerns just expressed by the Cement Association of Canada. Fire safety should be important to everyone. For firefighters, our first priority is the rescue of affected citizens and the safety of all emergency responders. Unfortunately, recovery of victims may also be a reality during this phase. Secondly, our job is to prevent fire from spreading to neighboring buildings, followed by putting the fire out. The proposed changes to the building code present 5 main challenges for us in this regard. We can't fight a fire if we can't get close to the building. The fire service needs room to operate aerial devices and attack fires from the exterior. The provisions under consideration don't require enough of the building's perimeter to be facing a street, so we can't easily access it. Potentially, this is a very serious issue for infill projects in major urban centers such as Toronto. There is no safe area of refuge. To do our job, it is essential that the fire service has a safe area of refuge from which we can stage our rescue and firefighting operations. The safe area is usually located 1 to 2 stories below the first fire floor in the stairwell and is used typically for staging equipment, personnel, and command to initiate our fire attack. In the proposed changes to the building code, the fire rating for the stairwells is not nearly sufficient enough to give responders enough time. Ideally, stairwells should be non-combustible. Even then, we have to realize that the internal rescue and fire operations will be hampered by fragile wood frame flooring. Fire containment may also be an issue. In the current proposal, the 2-hour firewalls that can be used to subdivide 5- and 6-story wood buildings are not required to be made of non-combustible construction, and they should be. To help prevent the fire from spreading to neighboring buildings, the exterior cladding of the wood building should be non-combustible for the full length of the building, not just the 5th and 6th stories, and as proposed. Finally, it is critical that every municipality properly assess whether they have the resources needed to fight a fire in these taller combustible buildings. We saw an example of this with a massive fire that devastated a 6-story combustible condo development project under construction in Richmond, BC in May of 2011. Before construction began, the Richmond Fire Department had indicated that its resources might not be adequate to fight a fire in a 6-story wood frame structure. That proved to be the case. The fire prevention officer at the time said to fight a fire effectively in such a structure would require new firefighting tactics, which could also require additional firefighting resources, more personnel, and higher reaching ladder trucks. As it was, the building burnt to the ground. There were 12 to 14 spot fires, and other fire departments had to be called in to help put the fire out. The safety of Canadians and our firefighters is the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions?
My question would be, how exactly have these changes come about? The proposed changes, at least, in regards to wood buildings, the 6-foot proposal.
Every 5 years, the National Building Code of Canada gets an update. So the last edition of the building code was 2010. The next edition will be 2015. During the intervening periods, groups who want to propose changes have the opportunity to do so. Task forces are struck. Research is done at the National Research Council. The code meets 3 or 4 times. Code Commission meets 3 or 4 times a year, and people and staff from NRC make representations on what changes should be made to the code.
And well, when you end up having these different proposals, you laid out these why it's a major issue within certain areas. But are there more concerns? You end up raising the whole idea of urban areas where they end up having this as a high density sort of construction. Was or is there anything within the current code that specifies where they are allowed to end up putting these buildings to begin with?
No, once it's in the building code, it's in the building code, and municipal zoning bylaws refer to the building code. So it doesn't matter whether this is going to be an infill development in a dense downtown area, or whether it will take place in a semi-rural area.
I guess the final question, since is there anyone else here?
You can ask as many questions as you like.
I want. Yeah, I guess when it comes to the larger sort of building construction and the materials that you talked about, when it comes to fire safety and some of the updates that they've made on, we were talking about the elevator and different things such as that. My question is, how exactly is it framed? Why were some of these changes, or how have some of these changes not included something as fundamental as a fire, including fireman's safety within this?
Yeah, well, these are the questions that really puzzle us. In our opinion, these are the largest changes being made to the National Building Code of Canada in a long time. And you would think that anything as integral as protecting the life of a firefighter or the people who are living in proposed six-story wood buildings would have been studied and analyzed 6 ways to Sunday. In our opinion, it has not been analyzed enough. And so that's why we're raising this, and we're asking members of parliament, provincial MLAs, mayors, to really talk to their fire services and get the opinion of their fire services. Carl, I'm sure you have something to add to that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael. The simple fact that for example, in Ontario, the FPPA speaks to what a city has to provide or a municipality has to provide to its citizens. And simply put, it's a smoke alarm program and public fire safety messages and information. Beyond that, a fire department is something that they decide whether they want to increase that level of service and provide that service to community. That being said, depending on the population and the tax base, they may not have the resources to buy something like a ladder truck or a telesquirt to provide safety for a building of this nature. With that, you'll see that multiple units providing a greater amount of water will be required, and this would be a challenge for the smaller communities in Ontario.
An increase in these types of buildings. You mentioned the 2001 fire within
2011.
Sorry, 2011. Are these sorts of buildings becoming more common to end up seeing them out of a wood construction, or is that perhaps why it's being considered? Or?
At the current time, they're only permitted. At the current time, they're only permitted in British Columbia. The British Columbia government made a decision about 4 years ago to go forward outside of the National Building Code of Canada and to allow 6-story wood buildings. So today, that's the only jurisdiction that allows them. And we've seen a real increase, as I said in my remarks, from those who are promoting taller wood buildings, in those people who are promoting those advocate